The blizzard was supposed to kill them. 15 massive wolves, frozen stiff in the dead of winter, left to rot on the edge of the territory. Everyone told Sarah to walk away. As an Omega, she was invisible, powerless, and barely scraping by. Saving them was a death sentence if she got caught. But she didn't listen. She dragged them into the warmth, one by one, starving herself to feed them. She thought she was just saving lost animals. She had no idea she was nursing the most feared Alpha King on the continent back to health. And when he finally shifts back, the entire hierarchy is going to crumble. The wind in the Bitterroot Mountains didn't just blow, it screamed. It tore through the thin walls of the maintenance shed where Sarah Miller lived, a constant reminder of her place in the Silver Creek Pack. She wasn't just a member. She was an Omega, the lowest of the low, tasked with cleaning up the messes the high-ranking wolves left behind. It was 3 days into the worst storm of the decade. The temperature had dropped to 40 below, and the order from Alpha Kyle had been clear. Stay indoors, preserve resources. But Sarah couldn't stay indoors. She had heard the howling. It had started at dawn, a mournful, broken sound drifting from the treacherous North Ridge. Most of the pack ignored it. To them, it was probably just rogues dying in the cold, and good riddance. But Sarah felt a pull in her chest she couldn't explain. Wrapping herself in 3 layers of threadbare wool and grabbing a rusted sled, she slipped out the back gate while the guards were huddled around their heaters. The trek was brutal. Snow whipped against her face like glass shards. When she finally reached the ridge, the sight made her knees buckle. It wasn't just one wolf, it was a massacre of nature. 15 of them. Massive timber wolves, their fur matted with ice and blood, lay scattered in a depression in the snow. They looked like statues carved from obsidian and slate, dusted with white powder. They weren't moving. "Oh God," Sarah whispered, her voice snatched away by the wind. She scrambled down the slope, her boots slipping on the ice. She reached the nearest one, a smaller grey wolf. She pulled off her glove and pressed her hand against its flank. Faint. So faint. But there was a heartbeat. "You're alive," she gasped. "You're all alive." She knew the law. If these were rogues, she was supposed to report them so the warriors could finish them off. If they were a rival pack, helping them was treason. The penalty was death. Sarah looked at the wolf's closed eyes. She thought of her own life, 22 years of scrubbing floors, eating scraps, and being told she was worthless because she couldn't shift properly. She looked at these majestic creatures, brought low by the indifferent cruelty of winter. Not today, she thought. Not on my watch. It took her 6 hours. She had to lash them to the sled one by one, dragging them half a mile to an abandoned logging barn that sat just outside the Silver Creek perimeter. It was a rotting structure, hidden by dense pines, a place she used to hide when the Alpha's son, Brad, wanted a punching bag. The last wolf she moved was the biggest. He was terrifying even in unconsciousness. Pure black fur, a chest as broad as a barrel, and scars crisscrossing his muzzle. He was heavy, like dead-weight granite. As she struggled to roll him onto the sled, his eyelids fluttered. A flash of gold, pure molten gold, met her gaze. Sarah froze. An alpha. This wasn't just a regular wolf. The power radiating off him, even in this state, made the hair on her arms stand up. He let out a low, rumbling growl, but it turned into a whimper of pain. "I've got you," Sarah whispered, shivering violently as the cold seeped into her bones. "I'm not going to hurt you, but if you stay here, you die." The gold eyes closed. By the time she got them all into the barn, Sarah was bordering on hypothermia herself. She collapsed against the rotting wood of the door, her lungs burning. The barn was freezing, but out of the wind. She lit the old potbelly stove she had restored months ago, feeding it every scrap of dry wood she had stockpiled. She had saved them from the storm. But now, the real problem began. They needed food, and Sarah barely had enough for herself. For the next 3 days, Sarah lived a double life that was slowly killing her. By day, she scrubbed the floors of the pack house, keeping her head down as Brad and his cronies kicked over her water buckets or made jokes about her scent. "Smell that?" Brad sneered on the second morning, sniffing the air as Sarah tried to mop up a spill in the hallway. "Smells like wet dog and desperation. Omega, have you been rolling in the mud?" Sarah gripped the mop handle until her knuckles turned white. "Just the storm, Brad. The pipes leaked in the shed." "Fix it," he snapped, kicking her shin as he walked past. "Or you sleep outside." By night, she stole. She raided the pack's pantry, taking risks that made her heart hammer against her ribs. Raw meat, bones, leftover stew, anything she could hide in her oversized coat. She smuggled it out to the barn, trudging through the snow in the dead of night. The wolves were healing. It was unnatural how fast they were healing. By the third night, most of them were conscious. When she entered the barn that night, 14 pairs of eyes turned to her. There was no aggression, only a wary curiosity. They knew she was the source of the warmth and the food. But it was the 15th pair of eyes that held her. The massive black wolf lay near the stove, his head resting on his paws. He hadn't moved much, his injuries severe, but he was always watching her. Intelligent, calculating. Sarah knelt beside him, pulling out a prime cut of roast beef she had swiped from the Alpha's personal leftovers. "Here," she whispered, holding it out. "It's the best I could get. Don't tell Alpha Kyle or he'll skin me." The black wolf didn't snap at the food. He looked at her hand, then up at her face. He sniffed her gently, his cold nose brushing against her palm. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through her that made her gasp. "You're different, aren't you?" she murmured, stroking the thick fur behind his ears. No one in her pack ever let her touch them. To them, she was unclean. "You're not a rogue. You act like soldiers." The wolf let out a soft chuff, almost like a laugh. Sarah sat back against a hay bale, exhausted. "I don't know why I'm talking to you. You probably don't understand half of it. I'm just the crazy Omega talking to stray dogs." She sighed, closing her eyes. "Brad says they're going to do a perimeter check tomorrow. If they find you, you have to be quiet. Please, if they find you, they'll kill you all, and they'll probably execute me for treason." The black wolf's ears perked up. The gold eyes narrowed. Suddenly, the barn door creaked. Sarah scrambled to her feet, heart stopping. The wolves bristled, low growls vibrating in their chests. "Sarah?" It was a whisper. Sarah sagged in relief. It was just Toby, the only other Omega who treated her like a human being. He was 14, scrawny, and terrified of his own shadow. He slipped inside, eyes widening as he saw the pack of wolves. "Holy... Sarah, are you insane? Those are... Look at the size of them." "Quiet, Toby," Sarah hissed, grabbing his arm. "What are you doing here?" "I followed you," Toby stammered. "I thought you were in trouble." "Sarah, look at the markings on that one." He pointed a shaking finger at the black wolf. "That's not just a wolf. That's a Royal Guard marking. And that one..." He looked at the black wolf. "That size, that's an alpha." "I know," Sarah said. "Help me check his leg. The wound isn't closing right." "We need to leave," Toby urged. "Brad is looking for you. He's drunk and he's angry about the heat going out in the main lodge. He thinks you messed with the boiler." Sarah's face paled. "I didn't touch the boiler." "He doesn't care," Toby said. "He's coming to the shed. If you're not there..." Sarah looked back at the black wolf. The wolf was trying to stand, his claws digging into the wood floor, a fierce protectiveness radiating from him. But his back leg gave out, and he collapsed with a huff of frustration. "I have to go," Sarah said to the wolf, her voice trembling. "Stay down, stay quiet. I'll be back before dawn." She turned to leave, but the black wolf let out a sharp bark. It sounded like a command. He locked eyes with her, conveying a message she couldn't quite read, but felt in her soul. "Don't go." "I have to," she whispered. She ran out into the snow with Toby, leaving the barn door latched. Inside the barn, the black wolf, Silas, the alpha king of the Obsidian Shadow Pack, the most powerful wolf on the continent, watched her go. He was healing, but not fast enough. He had heard the name Brad. He had smelled the fear on his savior. And for the first time in his life, the king felt a rage that had nothing to do with politics or war. He closed his eyes and focused on the bond connecting him to his men. "Shift," he commanded silently to his beta, who was recovering in the corner. "Shift as soon as you can. We have a debt to pay." The maintenance shed was cold, but the chill that ran down Sarah's spine when she saw the door ajar had nothing to do with the weather. She signaled Toby to hang back, but it was too late. A hand shot out from the darkness, grabbing Sarah by the collar of her oversized coat and yanking her inside. She hit the concrete floor hard, the air leaving her lungs in a wheeze. "Where have you been, rat?" Brad loomed over her. He was shirtless despite the cold, a beer bottle dangling from one hand. He was the Alpha's son, handsome in a cruel, sharp-edged way, with a sense of entitlement that had been bruising Sarah's life for years. Behind him stood two of his enforcers, grinning like hyenas. "I asked you a question," Brad snarled, kicking a bucket of dirty water over her. Sarah sputtered, gasping as the freezing water soaked through her clothes. "I was checking the perimeter," she lied, her voice shaking. "Like you asked, looking for drafts." "Liar," Brad spat. He crouched down, grabbing her chin and forcing her to look at him. His eyes were dilated, swimming with alcohol and aggression. "The pantry is light. Steaks, roasts, the good stuff. And you smell like it. You smell like meat and blood." He leaned in, sniffing her neck, and Sarah flinched. "And you smell like something else," he whispered, his face darkening. "Male wolf. Powerful wolf. Who are you meeting out there, Sarah? Selling pack secrets? Or are you just opening your legs for rogues because no one here wants you?" "No," Sarah cried out. "I didn't—" Smack. The back of his hand caught her cheekbone, splitting the skin. Sarah fell back, tasting copper. "Don't lie to me," Brad roared. "We found the tracks leading to the old logging barn. We know you're hiding something." Sarah's heart stopped. If they went to the barn now, while the wolves were still injured. "It's nothing," she sobbed, scrambling backward. "Just a sick deer. I was trying to nurse it. I wanted the meat for myself so I wouldn't starve." She had to make herself sound pathetic. Selfish. If they thought it was just a deer, maybe they wouldn't check immediately. Maybe they'd just beat her and go to sleep. Brad laughed, a cruel, barking sound. "A deer? You're stealing from the Alpha for a deer? You're even dumber than you look." He stood up, draining his beer and smashing the bottle against the wall. Glass shattered everywhere. "Lock her in the cellar," Brad commanded the enforcers. "No food, no water, and tomorrow morning we're going to that barn. If I find a deer, I'll kill it in front of her. If I find anything else, well, we'll see how much an Omega bleeds before she dies." "Brad, please!" Toby screamed from the doorway, rushing in. "She didn't mean it!" One of the enforcers backhanded Toby without looking, sending the teenager flying into the snow outside. "Leave him!" Sarah screamed, struggling as the guards hauled her up by her arms. "Don't hurt him! I did it! It was all me!" "Throw her in the hole," Brad sneered, turning his back on her. "I'm going to pass out. Wake me up at dawn. We're going hunting." They dragged Sarah out of the shed. The snow was falling harder now, a white curtain burying the world. As they hauled her toward the main house's cellar, a damp, stone dungeon used for rogue prisoners, Sarah didn't cry for herself. She looked toward the tree line, toward the hidden barn half a mile away. "Run," she prayed silently, hoping the message would somehow reach the Black Wolf. "Please, just run." She was thrown into the darkness. The heavy iron door slammed shut, the lock engaging with a final, doom-laden click. Sarah curled into a ball on the freezing stone floor, shivering violently as the wet clothes sapped her body heat. She touched her bleeding cheek. She had bought them time, maybe 6 hours until dawn. It had to be enough. In the barn, the silence was deafening. The wind howled outside, but inside, the air was thick with a sudden, suffocating pressure. It was the pressure of power, raw, ancient, and angry. The Black Wolf, the one Sarah had named Silas in her mind, was no longer on the floor. A cracking sound echoed through the barn, the sickening, wet sound of bones realigning. Fur receded into skin, the massive paws elongated into hands, the snout retracted. Seconds later, a man stood where the wolf had been. He was a giant. Standing nearly 6'7", Silas was a wall of muscle and scars. His black hair was wild, falling over eyes that retained that terrifying, molten gold color. He was stark naked, unbothered by the freezing temperature. His body was a map of violence, old claw marks, bullet wounds, and the fresh pink scars from the blizzard that were knitting together before the very eyes of his men. He didn't speak. He just inhaled. He smelled the stale hay. He smelled the lingering scent of lavender and fear that belonged to the girl. And he smelled the blood. Her blood. Fresh. Spilled in anger. A low growl started in his chest, vibrating through the floorboards. Around him, the other 14 wolves began to shift. It was a cascade of cracking bones and gasps of pain. One by one, they rose. These were not ordinary pack wolves. These were the Obsidian Guard, the elite death squad of the Royal Army. "Report," Silas said. His voice was like grinding gravel, unused for days, but commanding instant obedience. A man with sandy blonde hair and a jagged scar running down his chest stumbled forward. This was Declan, his beta and second in command. "Healing is at 80%, my king," Declan rasped, steadying himself against a wooden beam. "The frostbite is gone. We are combat ready, though not at full strength. We were ambushed on the pass. Poison. We couldn't shift." "I remember," Silas cut him off. His eyes were fixed on the barn door. "We were left to die, and we would have, if not for the Omega." A murmur of agreement went through the men. They all remembered the small hands, the soft voice, the warmth she had dragged into the cold for them. They remembered her starving herself to give them the Alpha's beef. "She is in distress," Silas said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet register. "I smell her blood. The male, Brad. He has taken her." Declan straightened up, his eyes flashing silver. "Permission to kill them all, sir?" Silas turned to look at his men. They were naked, battered, and unarmed, but they were the most dangerous things on the planet. "We are in Silver Creek territory," Silas stated coldly. "Alpha Kyle has been petitioning for a seat on the council for years. He claims his pack is civilized, honorable." He walked over to the corner of the barn where Sarah had piled some old, moth-eaten horse blankets and rusted tools. He grabbed a heavy iron crowbar, weighing it in his hand like a sword. He tossed a tarp to Declan. "Cover yourselves with whatever you can find," Silas ordered. "We march on the pack house." "And if they resist?" one of the guards asked, wrapping a burlap sack around his waist. Silas looked at the door, his golden eyes glowing in the gloom. The rage inside him was not the hot, chaotic anger of a boy like Brad. It was the cold, inevitable wrath of a king who had found his queen, even if she didn't know it yet, and found her to bleeding. "If they resist," Silas said, "Silver Creek ceases to exist tonight." The storm was at its peak when they left the barn. 15 men walked out of the tree line. They looked like demons risen from the ice. Some wore torn blankets like capes. Others wore nothing but the shadows and the driving snow. In the lead was Silas, the iron crowbar resting casually on his shoulder, his bare feet leaving deep impressions in the snow. They moved with a synchronized, predatory grace. They didn't run. They stalked. They reached the perimeter fence of the Silver Creek compound. 2 guards were huddled in a heated booth, smoking cigarettes. They saw the shapes emerging from the blizzard and laughed, thinking it was a group of drunken teenagers. "Hey!" one guard shouted, stepping out with a flashlight. "Private property. Turn around or we—" The beam of the flashlight hit Silas's face. The guard choked. He dropped the flashlight. He didn't know it was the king. Few had ever seen Silas in person and lived, but his wolf instinct screamed, "Submit or die." "Open the gate," Silas said. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. The guard's hands shook so hard he couldn't punch the code. I... Declan moved. He was a blur of motion. He crossed the 20 feet in a second, grabbed the guard by the throat, and tossed him into a snowbank like a rag doll. The second guard scrambled back, hitting the panic button. Sirens began to wail across the compound. Floodlights snapped on, bathing the snowy courtyard in blinding white light. "Good," Silas muttered, shielding his eyes. "Let them all come." They walked through the shattered gate. From the main lodge, warriors began to pour out. 20, then 30. They were Silver Creek wolves, well-fed, armed with batons and shock collars, confident in their numbers. Leading them was Alpha Kale, a greying, thick-set man wrapped in a fur coat. Beside him was Brad, looking annoyed at being woken up. "Who the hell are you?" Kyle boomed, stepping forward, his beta flanking him. "You trespass on my land, in my territory?" Brad squinted, stepping forward. "Wait, look at them. They're bums. Probably the rogue Sarah was feeding." He laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "Did you come for your little whore? She's in the cellar. We're going to have some fun with her later." The air temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees instantly. Silas stopped walking. He was 10 yards away from the Alpha. He looked at Brad, memorizing his face. "You put her in a cellar," Silas repeated. "I'll put you in the ground," Brad retorted, pulling a hunting knife from his belt. "Get them! Tear them apart!" The Silver Creek warriors charged. 30 armed shifters against 15 unarmed, half-naked men. It should have been a massacre. It was. But not the way Brad thought. "Kill," Silas commanded. The Obsidian Guard didn't even shift. They didn't need to. They met the charge with brutal, efficient violence. Declan caught a swinging baton, snapped the attacker's arm, and used the baton to knock out 2 others. Another guard ducked a knife slash and delivered a kick to a warrior's chest that collapsed his ribcage. It was chaos, but Silas walked through it like a ghost. Warriors lunged at him. He didn't break stride. He simply swatted them aside, his strength supernatural. A wolf in full shift leaped at his throat. Silas caught it by the neck mid-air, squeezed until a sickening crack echoed, and dropped the limp body. He walked straight toward Alpha Kale and Brad. Kale's face went from arrogance to horror in 10 seconds. He realized too late that these weren't rogues. The fighting style, the discipline, the sheer power. "Stop!" Kyle screamed, his voice cracking. "Stop! Who are you?" Silas stopped 3 feet from them. He towered over the Alpha. Blood, not his own, speckled his broad chest. He looked at Brad, who was trembling, the knife shaking in his hand. "I am the one she saved," Silas said, his voice carrying over the screams of the dying pack. "And you are the one who made her bleed." Silas raised his hand, the gold ring on his finger, The signet of the High King, usually hidden by magic but now blazing with light, flashed in the floodlights. "Kneel," Silas commanded. The power of the Alpha Command hit Cale like a physical blow. He didn't want to kneel. His mind rebelled. But his wolf knew. Cale's knees hit the snow with a thud. Brad, younger and stupider, tried to lunge with the knife. "Die." Silas moved faster than sight. He caught Brad's wrist, twisted it until the bone snapped, and then backhanded him across the face. Brad spun in the air, landing in a heap of broken limbs at his father's feet. Silence fell over the courtyard. The Silver Creek warriors who were still conscious dropped their weapons, sensing the shift in power. "My name is Silas Vane," the king announced, looking down at the shivering Alpha. "High King of the Shifter Alliances, and you are holding my mate." Kyle's face went grey. "King, we didn't know. We thought—" "Open the cellar," Silas ordered, stepping over Brad's groaning body. "If she has so much as a scratch on her, I will burn this entire mountain to ash." Alpha Kyle's hands were shaking so badly he dropped the keys into the snow twice. "Pick them up," Silas said. His voice was devoid of emotion, which made it infinitely more terrifying. He stood perfectly still, the snow melting the instant it touched his fever-hot skin. "If she is not out of there in 60 seconds, I take your hand. Then the other." Kyle scrambled, snatching the keys from the slush. The lock is old. It sticks." "You have 40 seconds, Silas remarked, checking an invisible watch. Kyle practically ran to the cellar doors. Heavy, slanted wooden storm doors reinforced with iron bands. He jammed the key in, twisting it violently. The mechanism groaned and clicked. "Open it," Silas commanded. Kyle heaved the doors open, revealing a set of stone steps descending into a black, gaping maw of darkness. A foul smell drifted up. Mildew, stagnant water, and the copper tang of old blood. Silas didn't wait for an invitation. He shoved Kyle aside, sending the older wolf stumbling into a snowbank and descended into the dark. "Light!" Silas barked over his shoulder. Declan appeared instantly at the top of the stairs, holding a heavy-duty flashlight. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating the horror of the Silver Creek cellar. It wasn't just a time-out room. It was a torture chamber. Chains hung from the walls. The floor was an inch deep in freezing sludge. And there, in the far corner, curled into a tight ball on a rotting wooden pallet, was Sarah. She wasn't moving. "Sarah," Silas breathed, the rage in his chest momentarily replaced by a sickening jolt of fear. He crossed the room in 2 strides, splashing through the filth. He fell to his knees beside her. She was blue. Literally blue. Her lips were cracked, her skin pale as marble, and her breathing was a shallow, rattling rasp. The bruise on her cheek where Brad had hit her had blossomed into a nasty purple welt that shut one of her eyes. "No, no, no," Silas whispered. His large hands hovered over her, afraid to touch her, afraid his strength would shatter her fragile form. "Sarah, can you hear me?" She didn't respond. The hypothermia was setting in deep. "I need blankets!" Silas roared up the stairs, the sound shaking dust from the ceiling. "Now! And get the medic." He scooped her up. She weighed nothing. She was so small, so malnourished even before the storm, that she felt like a bird in his arms. Her head lolled back against his shoulder, ice cold. As he lifted her, her eyelids fluttered. The one good eye opened a crack. It was glassy, unfocused. "Wolf," she whispered, her voice barely a ghost of a sound. She was delirious. You came back?" "I came back," Silas choked out, pulling her tightly against his bare chest, trying to push his lichen heat into her frozen body. "I told you! You save me! I save you!" "Run," she mumbled, her hand weakly gripping his bicep. "Brad, he'll kill you! Run, Wolf! Go!" She went limp again. Silas let out a sound that wasn't human. It was a roar of pure, unadulterated pain and fury. He turned and marched up the stairs, carrying her like a sacred relic. When he emerged into the courtyard, the scene had changed. The Silver Creek pack, nearly 200 wolves, had gathered. They stood in a wide circle, shivering in the wind, watching. They saw the giant stranger emerge from their dungeon carrying their pack, Omega. They saw the way he looked at her. "Make way," Declan ordered, stepping in front of his king. The sea of wolves parted. Silas didn't look at Cale. He didn't look at Brad, who was currently being held down by 2 of the Obsidian guards, weeping over his broken arm. Silas walked straight toward the Alpha's mansion. "Where are you going?" Kyle stammered, following behind like a scolded puppy. "That's my private residence." "It was your residence," Silas corrected without breaking stride. "Now it is my infirmary, and if you speak again, I will rip your tongue out." He kicked the front doors open, shattering the lock. The warmth of the house hit them instantly. Silas strode past the gaping servants, past the expensive artwork, and up the grand staircase. "Which is the master bedroom?" Silas demanded of a terrified maid cowering on the landing. She pointed a shaking finger to the double doors at the end of the hall. Silas kicked those open too. He marched to the massive king-sized bed, ripped off the silk duvet and the expensive Egyptian cotton sheets that smelled like Kyle's cologne, and threw them on the floor. "Fresh linens," he barked at the maid, "and warm water, soup, medical supplies. If you take longer than 2 minutes, you leave this pack forever." The maid scrambled. Silas laid Sarah down on the mattress protector. He climbed onto the bed beside her, ignoring the mud and blood he was tracking everywhere. He pulled her into his lap, wrapping his massive arms around her, rocking her gently. "Stay with me, Sarah," he commanded softly, pressing his forehead against hers. "That is a royal order. You are not allowed to die." Downstairs, the takeover was being finalized, but upstairs in the Alpha's bed, the king of all wolves was begging the lowest Omega to take a breath. Consciousness returned to Sarah in slow, confusing waves. First, there was the warmth. She wasn't cold. For the first time in 10 years, she wasn't cold. She felt like she was floating in a cloud. Then, the smell. It wasn't the mildew of the shed or the bleach of the cleaning closet. It smelled like sandalwood, rain, and pine. A deep, masculine scent that made her inner wolf, usually silent and dormant, purr. She opened her eyes. She was staring at a ceiling painted with a mural of the moon. A chandelier hung from it. She tried to sit up, but her body felt heavy, though not painful. She looked down. She was wearing a soft, oversized silk shirt that wasn't hers. Her hands were bandaged. "Easy," a deep voice rumbled from the corner of the room. Sarah gasped, scrambling backward against the velvet headboard. Sitting in a leather armchair by the window was a man. He was reading a book, wearing a dark grey tactical shirt that strained against his shoulders and black cargo pants. He looked civilized, clean, and impossibly handsome. But the eyes... "Wolf," she whispered. He closed the book and stood up. The sheer size of him made the room feel small. He walked toward the bed, his movements predatory but controlled. "Silas," he corrected gently. He sat on the edge of the mattress. "My name is Silas." Sarah stared at him, her mind racing. You shifted. You're a shifter." She looked at his hand, reaching out tentatively to touch his arm, checking if he was real. "But the cellar. Brad. Where am I?" "You're in the Alpha suite," Silas said. "And Brad is currently in a holding cell in the basement, waiting for you to decide what happens to him." Sarah blinked. "Me? But I'm an Omega. I can't decide anything. Alpha Kyle will kill me for being in here." Silas's expression darkened, a flash of that terrifying gold crossing his eyes. He reached out and took her hand. His skin was scorching hot. "Kyle is no longer Alpha," Silas said firmly. "I stripped him of his title 3 hours ago." "You stripped him?" Sarah laughed nervously, a hysterical edge to her voice. "Nobody can strip an Alpha except the Council or the King." Silas didn't say anything. He just looked at her. He waited for the pieces to fall into place. Sarah looked at the ring on his finger, a heavy gold band with a black obsidian stone, carved with the crest of a wolf howling at a fractured moon. She had seen that crest in history books. Every wolf was taught to fear and respect that crest from birth. The blood drained from her face. "Oh my God," she whispered, pulling her hand back as if burned. She scrambled off the bed, falling to her knees on the thick carpet, bowing her head. "Your Majesty, I didn't know. I touched you. I ordered you around. Please, I didn't know." The silence stretched for a heartbeat. Then she felt 2 large hands grip her shoulders. "Stand up," Silas commanded. "I can't," she stammered, staring at the floor. "I'm an Omega. I can't look at the king. It's the law." "I am the law," Silas growled softly. He pulled her up effortlessly, forcing her to stand before him. He lifted her chin with a gentle finger. "And the law says that the one who saves the king's life owns the king's life." Sarah stared at him, wide-eyed. I just fed you some stew." "You walked into a blizzard that killed grown men to save me," Silas said intensely. "You starved yourself so I could eat. You took a beating to protect my location." He stepped closer, invading her personal space, his scent wrapping around her like a blanket. "You are not an Omega, Sarah. Not anymore. I am promoting you." Before Sarah could ask what that meant, there was a knock at the door. "Enter," Silas barked, not looking away from Sarah. The door opened, and Declan walked in, looking clean and dressed in a crisp black military uniform. "Sir, the council representatives have arrived via helicopter, and the Silver Creek pack is assembled on the lawn for the judgment." Silas nodded. "We'll be down in 5 minutes." Declan left. Silas turned back to Sarah. He walked to a wardrobe, which Sarah realized was filled with women's clothes that definitely hadn't been there yesterday, and pulled out a long, black coat with a fur collar. "Put this on," he said. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked, her hands shaking as she took the coat. It was cashmere. It probably cost more than her entire life's earnings. "We are going to teach a lesson," Silas said, his eyes hard. "To Kyle, to Brad, and to everyone who ever looked at you and saw nothing." Walking out of the Alpha house was a surreal nightmare. Sarah walked half a step behind Silas, flanking them were the 14 other wolves she had saved, now fully dressed, heavily armed men who looked like a Praetorian guard. They formed a protective diamond around her. As they stepped onto the front porch, Sarah gasped. The entire pack was there, hundreds of them. Men, women, children. They were kneeling in the snow, head bowed, silent. In the center of the courtyard, 2 wooden posts had been erected. Tied to them, stripped to the waist and shivering violently in the biting wind, were Alpha Kyle and Brad. They looked pathetic. Kyle was weeping openly. Brad looked shell-shocked, his broken arm in a sling, his face a mask of terror. Silas stopped at the edge of the porch. He didn't use a microphone, but his voice carried to the tree line. "Look up," he commanded. 300 heads snapped up. Eyes widened as they saw Sarah. Not the dirty girl in the maintenance shed, but a woman standing at the right hand of the High King, wrapped in black cashmere, protected by the royal guard. "This pack," Silas began, pacing slowly, "has failed the fundamental test of our kind. We are wolves. We survive because we are a pack. We protect the weak. We honor the strong." He pointed a finger at Kyle. Your former Alpha left 15 of his own kind to die on his border because it was inconvenient to check on them, and he treated the woman who saved us like a slave. Silas turned to Sarah. Sarah, step forward. Sarah hesitated. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked at the faces in the crowd. She saw the cook who used to slap her hands if she took a carrot. She saw the women who laughed when Brad pushed her in the mud. They were all looking at her with terrified awe. She stepped forward. These 2 men, Silas said, gesturing to the prisoners. They hurt you. They humiliated you. By the laws of the High Court, their lives are forfeit. The penalty for harming a royal guest is death. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Kyle started screaming. Mercy! King Silas, mercy! I didn't know. Silence! Declan roared, backhanding Kyle into silence. Silas looked at Sarah. His expression softened. However, this is your home. These are your tormentors. I will not be a tyrant who kills your packmates without your consent. He pulled a heavy black iron pistol from his holster. He held it out to Sarah, handle first. The choice is yours, Sarah, Silas said, his voice ringing out. You can kill them. Right now. No one will stop you. Or you can banish them. Or you can forgive them. He leaned in close, whispering in her ear, so only she could hear. If you kill them, the pack will fear you. If you banish them, they will respect you. If you forgive them, they will walk all over you again. Choose wisely. Sarah stared at the gun. It was heavy, cold steel. She looked at Brad. He was looking at her, his eyes pleading. Sarah, he mouthed, please, we grew up together. She remembered him kicking the water bucket. She remembered the name-calling. She remembered the cold nights in the shed while he partied in the warm house. She took the gun. Her hand trembled, but she gripped it tight. She raised it, aiming it squarely at Brad's chest. The pack held its breath. Brad squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the bullet. Sarah stood there for a long 10 seconds. The power rushed through her veins. For the first time in her life, she held the cards. She could end it. Pop. Just like that. Slowly, she lowered the gun. She turned to Silas. I won't kill them, she said, her voice clear and steady. Silas raised an eyebrow, a hint of disappointment in his eyes. Or was it a test? But, Sarah continued, turning back to the crowd, I won't let them lead either. She walked down the steps, the snow crunching under her boots. She walked right up to Brad. You called me a rat, she said quietly. You made me sleep in the maintenance shed. You said I smelled like desperate dog. She leaned in. You are stripped of your rank. You are no longer an alpha heir. You are an omega. Brad's eyes snapped open. What? You heard me, Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. You will not be banished. You will stay here. You will clean the toilets. You will scrub the floors. You will sleep in the shed. And if I see a single speck of dust in the hallway, you sleep outside. She turned to Kyle. And you. You watched it happen. You're done. You will work in the kitchens under the cook you yelled at yesterday. She turned back to Silas, handing him the gun. That is my judgment. Silas stared at her. Then, a slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. It was a smile of immense pride. A fate worse than death, Silas mused, living as the thing they despised. He holstered the weapon and looked at the crowd. You heard the lady, Silas roared. Cut them down, give them their mops, and if anyone helps them, you join them. As the guards rushed to cut the ropes, Silas offered his arm to Sarah. Now, he said, let's go inside. We need to discuss the restructuring of our pack. Sarah looked at him sharply. Our pack? Silas pulled her close, his lips brushing her ear. You didn't think I was going to let you go, did you? You saved the king, Sarah. That makes you the queen. 3 months had passed since the blizzard that changed the fate of the Silver Creek pack. The snow had melted, revealing the scarred earth beneath, but the landscape of the pack itself had changed even more drastically. Sarah walked down the main hallway of the pack house. She wasn't wearing the oversized grey rags of an Omega anymore. She wore a tailored navy blue pantsuit that accentuated her figure. Her hair, once dull and brittle, now cascading in shiny chestnut waves down her back. Her boots clicked rhythmically against the marble floor. She stopped near the entrance. A man was on his hands and knees, scrubbing a scuff mark with a toothbrush. He was thin, his uniform grey and stained with sweat. He looked up as the shadow fell over him. It was Brad. "You missed a spot," Sarah said. Her voice wasn't cruel, it was indifferent. That was worse. Hate implies you still care. Indifference means you are nothing. Brad flinched, wiping sweat from his forehead with a dirty sleeve. "Yes, Mistress Sarah, I'll get it. It's Luna Sarah," a deep voice corrected from behind her. Brad paled, scrambling to press his forehead to the floor. "Apologies, Alpha King. Luna Sarah." Silas stepped up beside Sarah, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. He looked at Brad with the same interest one might show a cockroach. "Get back to work. The council arrives in an hour. If this floor isn't a mirror, you lose dinner privileges." Brad scrambled back to scrubbing, his shoulders shaking. Silas guided Sarah away, his touch warm and grounding. "You didn't have to stop for him," he murmured as they walked toward the grand hall. "I like to remind myself," Sarah admitted, leaning into him slightly. "Sometimes I wake up and think I'm still in the shed." Silas stopped, turning her to face him. His golden eyes searched hers. "You will never be in that shed again. I burned it down this morning. Did I not mention that?" Sarah smiled, a genuine bright smile that lit up her face. "You burned down the maintenance shed?" "It was an eyesore," Silas shrugged. "And I don't like looking at things that hurt you." But the peace of the morning was about to be shattered. The High Council, the governing body of all werewolf packs on the continent, had arrived. They weren't here for a social call. They were here because a rumor had spread. The King of all Wolves had taken an Omega as his mate without the formal trials. The grand hall was packed. The obsidian guard lined the walls, statues of lethal intent. In the center sat the 5 council elders, dressed in ceremonial red robes. Lord Sterling, the head elder, stood up as Silas and Sarah entered. Sterling was an ancient wolf, steeped in tradition and prejudice. He looked at Sarah with open disdain. "King Silas," Sterling began, his voice dry as parchment, "we are here to rectify a mistake." Silas led Sarah to the dais, sitting on the heavy wooden throne. He pulled a smaller, equally ornate chair closer for Sarah. "I am not aware of any mistake, Lord Sterling." "The girl," Sterling gestured vaguely at Sarah. "You have installed a Silver Creek Omega as your consort. It is charming, a fairy tale, but it is not legal. The Queen must be of Alpha blood. She must be strong. She must be able to bear the weight of the crown." The murmurs rippled through the hall. Sarah felt the old insecurity clawing at her throat. Worthless, weak, just a cleaner. Silas's growl vibrated through the room, silencing the crowd. "She saved my life. She saved the lives of my guard. She has more strength in her little finger than you have in your entire council." "Physical survival is one thing," Sterling scoffed, "but lineage is another. We have brought a candidate, Lady Veronica of the Iron Claws." A woman stepped forward from the shadows. She was stunning, tall, blonde, radiating alpha power. She looked at Silas with hungry eyes. "The law states," Sterling continued, "that if the king's chosen mate is challenged, she must prove her worthiness or step aside." Silas stood up, his fury palpable. "I am the king. I make the laws." "Not the laws of the moon," Sterling countered smoothly. Unless, of course, the Omega wishes to fight Lady Veronica? A trial by combat? He smiled. He knew Sarah would die in seconds against a trained Alpha warrior. Silas was about to order the execution of the entire council. His claws were already extending, but a small hand touched his arm. "No, Silas," Sarah said softly. The room went silent. Sarah stood up. She didn't look at Silas. She looked at Lord Sterling. "I won't fight her," Sarah said clearly. Sterling smirked. "Smart girl. You surrender?" "No," Sarah said. "I said I won't fight her because that proves nothing. You want to know if I'm strong enough to be queen? You think strength is just claws and teeth?" She walked down the steps of the dais. The obsidian guard tensed, ready to intervene, but she waved them off. She stopped inches from Lady Veronica. The alpha female towered over her, growling low in her throat. "Hit me," Sarah said. Veronica blinked. "What?" "Hit me," Sarah repeated. "Use your alpha voice. Use your command. Do your worst." Veronica laughed. "I will break you." Veronica drew back her hand and unleashed a backhand slap, fueled by full alpha strength. It was a blow that would have shattered a normal human's jaw. Crack! Sarah's head snapped to the side. She stumbled, falling to one knee. Blood poured from her lip. The crowd gasped. Silas roared, lunging forward, but Declan held him back, understanding what Sarah was doing. Sarah didn't cry out. She spat a mouthful of blood onto the floor, and then she stood up. She wiped her mouth, her eyes burning with a cold blue fire. She looked at Veronica. "Is that all?" Sarah asked calmly. Veronica looked confused. She growled, "Kneel, Omega! Submit!" She used the alpha voice, a psychic attack that forces weaker wolves to the ground. It hit Sarah like a physical wave. Sarah's knees trembled, her vision blurred. The instinct to curl up and beg was overwhelming. But Sarah thought of the blizzard. She thought of dragging a 300-pound wolf through 4 feet of snow. She thought of 10 years of hunger, of cold, of being told she was nothing. "I survived the cold," she thought. "I survived the hunger. I survived the loneliness. You are just a loud woman in a red dress." Sarah locked her knees. She lifted her chin. She looked Veronica dead in the eye and took a step forward. "No," Sarah said. The shockwave in the room was palpable. An Omega resisting a direct alpha command was unheard of. It was impossible. Unless she wasn't just an Omega. "I said kneel," Veronica screamed, panic setting in. She pushed harder, her power flaring. Sarah didn't budge. She walked forward again, forcing Veronica to step back. "You think power is being born lucky," Sarah said, her voice ringing out, steady and unbroken. "Power is suffering and not breaking. Power is mercy when you could kill. Power is keeping 15 men alive when the world wanted them dead." Sarah turned to Lord Sterling. The old wolf looked terrified. "I am not an alpha by blood," Sarah declared. "But I am the one who tamed the king. I am the one who holds his leash. And I am the one who decides who stands in this room." She pointed at the door. "Get out." It wasn't a request, it was a command. And to everyone's horror and awe, it carried the weight of a lunar. Silas walked down the stairs. He didn't look at the council. He went to Sarah, taking a handkerchief and gently wiping the blood from her chin. "You are bleeding," he whispered, his eyes full of pain. "I've had worse." Sarah smiled, wincing slightly. "Brad hits harder than her." Silas turned to the council. "You heard the Queen. Get out, before I let her loose on you." Lord Sterling bowed. It wasn't a mocking bow this time. It was a bow of genuine fear. He realized what Silas had found. Sarah wasn't just a mate. She was a true lunar, forged in fire rather than born in privilege. As the council fled and the door slammed shut, the obsidian guard began to bang their fists against their chest plates. A rhythmic, thundering sound. "Luna! Luna!" Luna. Silas swept Sarah up into his arms, ignoring her protests. "The ceremony happens tonight," he declared to the room. "I'm not waiting another day." The mating ceremony was held under the full moon in the center of the Silver Creek territory. It wasn't just the pack who attended. Wolves from neighboring territories, hearing the legend of the Omega who defied the council, came to watch. Sarah wore a dress of silver silk, simple and elegant. She stood before Silas, who looked like a god of war in his ceremonial blacks. There were no priests, no long speeches, just the two of them and the moon goddess. "I, Silas Vane," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "reject the expectations of my rank. I reject the lineage of blood. I claim the lineage of the soul." He took Sarah's hands. "I claim you, Sarah Miller. Not as my subordinate, not as my rescue, but as my equal, my balance, my life." Sarah looked up at him. The gold in his eyes was no longer terrifying. It was home. "I, Sarah Miller," she whispered, "accept you, Silas Vane. I claim your rage and your peace. I claim your pack as my own." Silas leaned down. He didn't kiss her lips. He tilted her head back, exposing the delicate curve of her neck. "Do it," she breathed. Silas sank his teeth into the junction of her shoulder and neck. The pain was sharp, but it was fleeting. It was instantly replaced by a flood of warmth, a golden tether snapping into place between their souls. Sarah gasped as she felt him, his immense strength, his fierce protectiveness, his boundless love pour into her mind. She wasn't alone. She would never be alone again. Silas pulled back, licking the mark to seal it. He looked at her, his eyes glowing brighter than ever. "How do you feel?" he asked. Sarah looked at the crowd. She looked at Cale and Brad, watching from the back, heads bowed in submission. She looked at the Obsidian Guard, ready to die for her. She looked at the moon. She felt the bond settling in her chest, heavy and permanent. "I feel," Sarah said, a wicked smile playing on her lips, "like I'm finally warm." Silas laughed, a joyous sound that echoed off the mountains. He kissed her then, a searing, passionate kiss that promised a lifetime of devotion. The Omega of Silver Creek was gone. The Wolf Queen had risen, and the world would never be the same. And that is the story of how one act of kindness in a blizzard changed the fate of an entire kingdom. Sarah proved that true power doesn't come from the rank you are born with, but the strength of your character when the world tries to freeze you out. She went from the girl sleeping in the maintenance shed to the queen who brought the High Council to its knees. What do you think? Did Brad and Cale get off too easy with just cleaning floors, or was living as Omegas the perfect punishment for their arrogance? I think Sarah showed incredible restraint. Personally, I might not have been so forgiving. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, romance, and karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. I post new werewolf and romance dramas every week. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.